Come on, Kerala. Come on, Kerala.
Morning. It's a Friday morning, I know, and all of you are here. Thank you so much. But I'd like to have some more energy in the room. Can we have another round of applause for yourself for being here? Once again, good morning.
Good morning.
It's nice to feel the energy in the room because it gives me energy. It lets me give you the best of what I can. So, the first thing that I want you to do is take out your smartphones. Each one of you. Take out your smartphones and take a picture of this slide. I'm going green, and the reason is, at the end of the session, usually I get a lot of requests for business cards, and what I want to do is business cards get thrown away. So you have the contact details if you'd like to connect with me. But more than that, I want you to keep the phones with you. I don't want you to keep it in your pockets. When a topic or a slide reflects with you, resonates with you, I want you to take another picture. Keep taking pictures. It will help you remember as you go along what it was that you grabbed during the session. Now, the format that I'm going to use in today's session is going to be a lot of visual aids, because what I want you to do is, I've realized during my journey that there are two kinds of people. There are three kinds of people, actually. There are people who are auditory, there are people who are visual, there are people who are kinesthetic. And if we learn this, about this learning methodology, it can create all the difference. For instance, if we knew what is the inclination that our children have, there are certain times a child sits in front of a book all day long and still doesn't grasp. But if he listens in class, he's able to grasp. That child is auditory. Sometimes they need experience to understand what the topic is. So, it's going to be a mix of visual and auditory today. You'll hear me speak and convey the message, but at the same time, I'm going to use the help of visual aids so that you get the message a little more clearer. Now, to dive in, the first thing that I'll ask you is, when you need to travel from F to G, so think about this. Now, I've been a transformational coach, I've been working with organizations, and I've been very intrigued by the whole concept of how can we create great organizations? What is the fundamental thing that we can do? And when I say organizations in this context, you must remember, organizations does not necessarily mean companies. It can mean families. It can mean a small entity. It doesn't have to be an organization of 500,000, 10,000, no. So when you are reflecting today, we have parents in the house. We have CEOs in the house. We have leaders in the house. We have community leaders in the house. We have all kinds of people spread out over here. And you will resonate and see that you will be able to take away from here today, in some manner or the other, something that you can apply in your lives. So imagine you're going from F to G. If you're going from F to G, and why I don't say A to B, because that is a typical one, right? Everybody says, let's go from A to B. But the reason why I say F to G is because you have all arrived somewhere in your journey. You're not at the starting point. You have reached somewhere. You have accumulated a vast amount of knowledge and experiences so far in your life. So I say, let's move from F to G. So F is a result. And if F is a result, how do you get that? It is a result of all the actions that you have taken until today. Do you agree or not? Say yes. Yes? So F is a result of all the actions that you have taken until today. So imagine if you start taking similar actions. Will you get different results? You'll get similar results. In future, what you will also get is similar results. But what are we doing when we look for similar results? Aren't we then limiting ourselves to mediocrity? So if we want better results, what we need to do is we need to identify what are the different actions that we need to take along our journey that will make the difference. So if you want to go from F to G, What you need to do is you need to identify all the blanks, all the things that you need to be doing along the journey to get to G. And what happens when you get to G? Anyone? You get better results? What else? What happens after you get to G?
More satisfaction.
You have more satisfaction? And what do you do moving forward?
You set a new goal.
Yes, you set new goals. You get energetic. What I say is, G becomes the new F. G becomes the new F, and you're going to another G. When you get to G, you keep coming back to F and redefining your journey, because F is your point in time now. Right? So G is something in the future which you're always aspiring towards. So G becomes the new F. So what is F and what is G? F, I say, is the fixed mindset. And G is the growth mindset. When you say whatever you're doing today is not enough, and I need to be doing more, I need to be doing something extra, then what you're constantly doing is you are looking for that growth. So if you are in a journey where you're saying, I'm going to continuously grow, then what happens is you create an opportunity for yourself to go from fine to great. So F becomes the fine and G becomes great. Meaning, you can be fine today, but if you need to be great. Now the funny thing is, I just mentioned to you something just a bit ago, time ago, that when you get to G, G becomes the new F. So in a manner of speaking, you never actually become great. You always keep aspiring towards greatness. So it's a continuous process. You do not land and say, I have arrived. This is who I am and I'm the greatest. No. Because all it takes is just like that. Look at Nokia, for instance. They were at the top of the game. We all thought they were unbeatable. They're no more today, right? So look at Kodak. Kodak is the company which first discovered and invented digital photography. But they refused to accept that people, professional photographers, would move to a digital format of photography. They said, for all times to come, they will always depend on films. And films are no more today. And if the young ones over here are wondering what films are, there used to be a camera before where you had filmed rolls put into cameras to take photographs, and you could take just about 36 photos in a camera with a roll. Gone are those days. So a fundamental question that I ask next is, why do companies exist? Why do companies exist? Anyone volunteer? Why do companies exist? How many of you in the room are CEOs? Could you raise your hands? Business owners? Aspiring to be business owners? Brilliant. Why do companies exist? Yes?
Serving customers.
Serving customers? Pardon?
To give a value-added service to all customers.
To give a value-added service to all customers? Our own existence? To make profit? Solution? Solution provider. When you start a company, you don't think about profits. When you start a company, you don't think about... So, in essence, what I'm talking about is, when you start a company, when you're starting a company, you're at F, and you're looking at G. What is that G? Is my question in another way of speaking. For next level. Now, there is a next level to all your journeys. The fundamental answer that I truly believe why companies exist is somebody's a solution provider. What I say is to fulfill a need in the market. Companies exist to fulfill a need in the market. How many of you agree with that? Yes?
Yes.
Companies exist to fulfill a need in the market. Now, if you want to go from fine to great, what do? What do you have to do to make your company go from a fine company to a great company? To understand the needs in the market is why you started the company. What I say is, you have started the company to fulfill the need in the market. And if you want to become a great company, what you do is you fulfill that need better than anybody else. So you fulfill that need better than anybody else, which means what you do is constantly you ask, what are your competitors doing? What is the market doing? And how can I be better than that? You're constantly asking that question of how can I be better than everybody else to fulfill that need in the market? Next question. Why employees work? Answers? To fulfill their benefits. To fulfill your own needs. To make money, to take care of family. These are common answers that we always get. Why employees work? Right? But imagine if why employees work and why companies exist is the same, which is to fulfill the need better than anybody else in the market. If you align everybody within your organization with the mindset that we are here to serve the market and we are going to do it better than anybody else in the market, imagine the mind shift that is going to happen in the complete organization. Every conversation that you have, every question that you raise, every objection that you raise will all be aligned with this basic philosophy. Are we serving the best we can in the market? And this applies to everybody. It can be even applied to a T-boy. Because a T-boy in the company is a face of the company when a client comes in. And how is it that you are impacting the customer? How does your competitor serve the customers? If you have a financial accountant within the organization, are you doing better than everybody else in the market to serve this need? If you're a salesperson, how much are you doing better than everybody else doing in the market? To know that, what you need to do is understand what the market is doing in the first place. Explore. And it doesn't limit with 5, 10, 15, 20. Your research will go on and on and on. And then when you get there and you have no competitors, then your biggest competitor is you. Your company becomes your biggest competitor if you do not have competition. You do not stand still. You challenge yourself and say, this is who we are. How can we be better than that? And if we are in this continuous thought process of thinking and challenging ourselves and thinking, how can we be better than everybody else, things will unlock. Now I ask people, who is a CEO? Within an organization, I say a CEO is a person who is responsible to make sure what we just said, to maintain the energy and the focus and the ecosystem towards the vision that he has set of moving towards G, which is to fulfill the need better than anybody else in the market. So I say CEO is Chief Energy Officer, Chief Ecosystem Officer. Every organization has leaders and managers. And what's the difference? A manager is somebody who speaks to instruct and inform, whereas a leader speaks to instruct, inform, and inspire. And when you speak to inspire, what happens is you do not have to spoon feed your people constantly. They get inspired to take action on their own, and magic happens. One of the stories of Ritz-Carlton Hotel is they service employees. When you're in the service industry, your biggest service is what will attract clients more and more. So every person on the floor has about $200 budgeted to spend on wowing the customers. They don't even have to take permission from anyone. The organization truly believes that they trust their people, they have set the agenda, they know that these people will well use the money. And it could be anything. So I heard this story from a gentleman called Karthik Shiva, who used to travel and go to different hotels across the world. And when he went to Ritz-Carlton in the US, he said, I'd love to stay only in this hotel. And he stayed over there, and at night he remembered that he had forgotten to get his shoes, his running shoes. So he called up the concierge and said, I know it's a bit not a common question to ask, but would you mind, or would you possibly have a shoe, a spare shoe? Let me get back to you, sir. Just give me a few minutes. Within half an hour or 1 hour, the man comes back with a pair of Adidas shoe. He comes back with a pair of Adidas shoe and presents it to Karthik Shiva, the man, and tells him, sir, it's too late in the evening, and I know you might like Reebok or Puma, I'm not sure, but this was the only store I could open up at this hour in the night. He managed to convince, and Karthik says, I have no clue how they managed to do it. But when you have customer service like that, and he used it, and when he was leaving on the last day, they put the box on his bed and said, with best compliments, and they gave it to him as a gift. He didn't even have to pay for it. What do you think of a customer like this? He'll never go back to another hotel, right? So the next time he went to the US, he booked again the Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton. And when he entered the room, on his bed was another pair of with best compliments. When you can wow your customers, there are so many umpteen ways, and it's not only about shoes, it can be so many subtle ways. It's about knowing what it is that your clients are looking for and going beyond what you can do and inspiring amazing action. Now, when I say about this, I mean, you're thinking about organizations. Does this word creep into your mind? There's a lot of ego play in the organization. Yes or no? Yes. Right? But what is ego? Eric Berne, in the 1960s, is a doctor and a very famous author. He's written the book, Games People Play and Transactional Analysis. It's a brilliant psychological book that everybody should possibly pick it up and read. There's another one called I Am Okay, You Are Okay, which is also about transactional analysis and how the ego states play between communication between two individuals. So let's have a definition of what ego is according to Eric Berne. An ego state is a consistent pattern of feeling and experience. An ego state is a consistent pattern of feeling and experience directly related to a corresponding consistent pattern of behavior. A very long sentence, are you confused? Look at it like this again. It's a consistent pattern of feeling and experience directly related to a consistent pattern of behavior. You'd maybe want to take a picture of this slide so that you can reflect on this later on. But that's what an ego state is. Now, this is the starting point of the whole conversation moving forward. Now, every individual has 3 ego states. Just 3 ego states that every individual has. And they're called the parent state, the adult state, and the child state. The parent state of ego, the child state of ego, and the adult state of ego. Now, what does this mean? What is the parent state of ego? You don't have to be a parent to have a parent state of ego. A parent state of ego means it is what you have learned and imbibed within you through practice from whatever you have been taught from the age of 0 to 5. When you're a young child, your mind forms a state of ego, which is called the parent state, and that stays with you for the rest of your life. This is why it is so important the way we deal with children, because what you're doing is you're shaping their minds for the rest of their lives. And what is a child state of ego? It is during that same period, whatever the child has done. It is whatever the child has done during that 0 to 5 age, which is called the child state of ego. Now, we can all invoke the child in us or the parent in us at different scenarios when we are dealing with different situations. And the adult state of ego is the ego state which started at the age of 18 months for each and every one of us, where we start seeing and questioning and absorbing information. So we have this questioning mind constantly in us, where we question everything. And that is the adult state of ego. Ego is not a bad word. We have negative connotations about the word ego, but ego is just a reference point. So once again, it's a consistent feeling, pattern of feeling and experience that is related to behavior. Feelings and experience directly related to behavior. This will make sense moving forward. Now, in an organization context, and when I say an organization context, you might even think about your own homes if you'd like. If you want to have a better comparison, or if you're working, I have written over here on the slide employer and employee. Now, it doesn't mean that you are the owner or the one who is actually employed. It is for each one of them who has subordinates working under them. So if you have somebody who is reporting to you, then you are the employer and that person is the employee. And if you are reporting to somebody, then you are the employee and that person is the employer. So the reference is set, right? Now, in an organization, there's an employer and an employee at various levels throughout the hierarchy, right? Now, what happens in this? When you are being interviewed for the very first time and trying to get that job, you both are in the adult state of conversation, which means you're rationalizing, you're asking, you're not in a submissive role. You're not in a role where you are above or below. You're both at par, if you choose to. There are people who are in a submissive role as well within organizations. But the ones who really make an impact are the ones who are in the adult state of conversation. Which is why it is very important that when you go to attend an interview, you do not go with the mindset that I'm going to get something from there. I hope I get this job. If you also think, I hope I can add value to this company, I hope I can give something, then the communication that you will have will be completely different. The way you will approach the interview will be completely different. Agree or not? Right? So when you go with the mindset that, let me see what I can get as well as give, then the conversation during the interview will be to make sure that there is give and get. I will offer you these services, I'm qualified. What is it that the organization will give me? Now, you're both in the adult state of conversation, but what happens in most organizations is, and this is a sad reality, once you're hired, once you get the job, the employer moves to the parent state of ego and pushes the employee to the child state of ego, stating, I'm the boss, listen to me. I know what it is, just do it. Have you seen this in your organizations? Right? Now, there will be those people who will be submissive and say, all right, I'll do it, yes. Or they'll rebel. There are those who are really smart, who really know their stuff, and who do not bow down. Those people, what they will do is, they will go one up as well. And they will challenge. They will challenge the conversation. To have a growth mindset within an organization, both have to be in an adult state of conversation. Now, how can you establish an adult state of conversation? In communication, what you need to do is, within an organization, when you look at it, most of the time what happens is they always expect something out of you. Your boss always expects something out of you. You expect something out of somebody else. When you are in a relationship, you expect that person to deliver in a certain manner. Right or wrong? Yes. What is the fundamental flaw of this is, when you are expecting something, you are going into the parent state of ego. When you expect somebody to behave in a certain manner, what you're doing is you are pushing yourself into the parent state of ego, and then you're waiting for a response. And that could be either from an adult, a child, or a parent state of ego from the other person, which neither of them are ideal because you have already pushed yourself into the parent state of ego by setting expectations. But if you want to have an effective adult-to-adult conversation, then what you need to do is, you need to have agreements versus expectations. You need to set agreements with anyone that you're having in communication with. So what you do is, you say, this is what I want to be delivered. In any equation, in any relationship, in any circumstances, these are what I would like to have. Would you be able to deliver? If not, what are the hurdles? If you can go beyond this, what more can you do? So when you set agreements, your opportunity for success is so much more. This is probably why we have bilateral agreements and not bilateral expectations, right? So you have to have the growth mindset. And if you need to have the growth mindset in your organization while having communications, then what you do is you create an opportunity from becoming a fine company or a fine individual to a great individual or a great organization. Now, while you're doing this, what happens is, I have identified one fundamental thing that is sometimes lacking. A few weeks ago, I was having this interesting conversation with a gentleman who is a very good friend of mine from college days, and we always have these brilliant, amazing conversations. And for me, life is all about conversations. I call myself the corporate conversationalist because I go into organizations and have those conversations that are really missing within corporates. So what I wanted to find out, what is that one ingredient, one thing that can make sure that interaction between two people succeed at the greatest level? What is that one element that we can have which can ensure that we have the greatest success of that relationship working. 2 weeks ago at my platform on Awesome Workers, I had this gentleman whose name is Khalid Al-Ghuraib, and he calls himself the relationship architect. And I asked him this question. And he said curiosity. And I thought that was a very interesting answer as well. Be curious. Be constantly curious about the other person. Try to understand why is it they do what they do. But yet again, I'm always trying to figure out what could be the KPI, what could be that one thing that we can define and say, if we said this, we can have a great relationship, we can have a great organization, we can have great communication. And I figured out one answer. And I call it common goals. And we never set these in our conversations. When we are having a relationship with an individual, with a colleague, with anyone, we never set common goals from an adult state of conversation at least. Sometimes we set common goals from an expectation phase. What we do is, we set common goals from a parent state of ego. And when we set common goals from a parent state of ego, it is not the greatest of relationships. It is not the one. And when I say parent and child, do not mistake that we are talking to a child. We are talking to a person who feels not empowered enough to have an adult state of a conversation. Now we all, each and every one of us, in different engagements that we will have, will step into either the parent, adult, or child. I am not saying that we will always be in the adult state of conversation. But if we have the awareness, what state of ego am I in right now? We create the opportunity to make sound judgments. So when we set common goals, what we do is we create the opportunity for having an opportunity to take this relationship to a much, much bigger level. Now, if both are in the parent state of ego, again, it's not working. So what we need to do is we need to both be in the adult state of conversation while we set common goals. Now, common goals is a very interesting terminology, and it can mean a lot of things, right? Common goals. It can be anything. But there is something that I identified which can be broken down again in this segment. Common goals can be split into two, and if we split into two, it makes the greatest of meaning for me. When we set common goals with any individual while having an adult state of conversation, what we need to do is we need to realize there are two parts of it. One is the visible and one is the invisible. There is a visible part of the conversation, visible part of the goals, and the invisible part of the goals. And what do I mean by this? Let's go back to the earlier slide. Ego. It's a consistent pattern of feeling and experience directly related to the consistent pattern of behavior. So if you notice, behavior or how we act in life is a visible part of how we deal with people. Feelings and experience is the invisible part. So if we set milestones and goals and things that we want to accomplish, like for example in a relationship, if we say a child's education, marriage of the children, making money, all these are goals that we set commonly, yes? So what are the invisible goals? The invisible goals are the core values that holds us together. So it's like a pearl. If you think of a pearl necklace, what happens is all the pearls are the visible goals. And the thread that holds it all together, we only appreciate the beauty of the pearls, but what holds it together is the thread. Meaning, what holds all this together are the core values. So when you interview people actually, when you are looking for a life partner, what you do is you always look for both. And how do you look for both? How do you look for the invisible goals? I truly believe you look for invisible goals through stories. Look for them through stories. Ask them to reflect on their life. Ask them to reflect on their journeys. When you hire somebody, when you are working with a colleague, when they are telling you a problem, the problem is really not the problem. There is something deeper behind the problem. So if you can identify what are the visible goals and the invisible goals and set them. So for an organization, what you do is you set those invisible goals. It has been very famously shouted about the visions, mission, and goals of an organization. All this comes into place in this format. But what happens is all these statements just reside on the walls or on websites. Nobody lives with them. It does not become the DNA of the organization. It does not become what the organization is all about. So when you say within an organization that we come here and each one of you come here to fulfill a need in the market and we are going to do it better than anybody else and every conversation is going to revolve around that, it's a shared common goal for everyone. And they constantly ask, how can we be better than everybody else? And if anything that you do, if it's not aligned, it does not work. So to summarize, how to create a great organization. How to create a great organization. What I would say is, my whole presentation today, if you were to put it into one slide, it would be like this. Common goals, when achieved through conversation, in an adult state of conversation, an adult state of ego, where you constantly look towards greatness within your organization. We're constantly asking, what are the blanks that I need to fill up along my journey? What are the things that I need to do so that I can get to where I want to be? And if somebody asks you and you say, I'm here to make money, remember, money is only one of the blanks. It is not G. Fame or anything that comes along is only one of the blanks. Last evening, I had a session with one of the famous RJs in Dubai, Kritika Rawat, and when we asked her about fame, she said, for me, fame is just one of the things that comes with my job, one of the perks that comes with my job. It's not something that I was ever looking for. And that made a deep impact on me. When you realize what have you set your G, ask each one of yourself today. For me, what is my G? What is the G that I have set for myself moving forward? And what are the blanks along the way? As a coach, what I do is I help identify people find those blanks. But I tell them always, the blanks are for you to fill. I might just reflect them for you. And when you do that, and when each and every one of you do that over here, and in the communities outside, imagine the society that we'll start living in. A great one indeed. It's been a wonderful audience. We have been coming to the end of the session. I want you all to pick up the phone right now and type this in your browser. This is a feedback form for me before we move into the Q&A. 3 simple questions that you can answer. I'll give you a minute for that. Yes? Questions?
You talked about the common ground. How do you establish the common goals when the needs of the employer and employee in most organizations normally would be, not similar, because most people just go to a job because for the salary. So how does the employer make the employee come to a common goal? Because in most of the organizations we see that they are poles apart.
So this is a very interesting question that, thank you very much for that question. There's a very interesting question that somebody asked my coach and asked him, how do we get somebody to change if they don't want to? How do we get somebody to change like our boss does not want to change? Can you do something about it? And he said, no, you can do nothing. If the person does not want to change, there is nothing in the world that you can do to make that person change. The change has to happen from within, from each person. So you need to identify. So what happens, the way we look for jobs is so broken. It's so broken the way we approach job hunting, the way we approach our career, where we spend 80% of our waking hours, 70 to 80% of our waking hours we spend at a place, and the way we look for that is so broken because all we do is we go to a place to work in a child state of ego. Most of us go to a job in a child state of ego. We do not push ourselves into that state of ego, then how can we blame our boss for being in what a state of ego? So yes, it is a challenge, which is why it is very important that when you are walking into an organization and you are going to get a job, you need to understand who it is that you will be reporting to, and you need to make that conversation before you step into the role. Because otherwise your life is going to be hell. Does that answer your question? You're still struggling. How do you find common goals? Common goals can be found only through conversations. You ask your boss, what is it that you want me to achieve? And what do I get in return? Money apart, we are all getting paid for our services. But what is the career progression that you see for me in the next 5 years? Ask that rational question. How is it contributing to the bigger picture of the organization? What is doing this going to add value to the way we do things? So if you're going into the adult state of conversation and asking your boss, or any person for that matter, why are we doing what we're doing? And if you ask that question, we create the opportunity to start unlocking answers. And if the person refuses to answer, now you'll notice from tomorrow when you go to your offices, when you go home today, if you are aware, you'll start realizing the conversations that you're having with each other. Why do you have amazing conversations with friends, for instance? Most of the time what happens is you're both in the child state of ego or in the adult state of ego. And when friendships break is when somebody tries to go into the parent state of ego. Right or wrong? Right? So all you have to do is ask, what is it that we have to do together to achieve something? If you want to be in that little state of ego tomorrow, walk into your boss's office and ask, what is our vision? What are we trying to achieve? And how can we do it better than anybody else? And then you should be ready to put in the hard work. And that's where the difference will happen. Next one.
I have to be at the level of the the interviewed to start the conversation, right?
Yes.
So to understand each other.
Yes.
So now, once he is an employee or she is an employee, the leadership things comes in mind.
Yes.
Yeah, in the organization level. He is into organization hierarchy. So at that level, if you are having this adult-to-adult conversation, the employee will be having a feeling like, I can't explain it even better. They will have a feeling like, this manager is not a leader. Or maybe a leader is someone who needs to be respected sometimes. Or maybe it is a kind of a mindset or the work culture we have developed over the period. Or maybe that is something which has been left behind by the colonial.
Yes.
Yeah. So when we are not respecting each other in terms of work, or maybe the the respectability of any jobs or any workmanship, which we are not experiencing generally, then this kind of a peer level conversation never starts.
All right. What you mentioned is, when you are into an organization and you are a leader, then you need to behave in a certain manner to be respected. You cannot go down, or else you will lose respect. Am I right or wrong in my understanding? Right? What is the definition of respect? What is the definition of respect? How is it that we earn respect? Is it through aggression or passiveness? What happens in organizations or between any communication is, we mistake aggression for being firm. We mistake aggression for leadership. When we speak to somebody and we are aggressive, what we are doing is we are saying, we are right, you are wrong, we are in the parent state of ego. And when we are passive, then we are going into the child state of ego. There's something in between where you respect as well as you're firm. And that is called communicating affirmatively. When you can communicate affirmatively, which is you're firm with your opinions and decisions, at the same time you respect the person sitting on the other side, you're polite, you will gain respect. Respect is not earned through aggression. Respect is also not earned by being passive. It's something in between called being affirmative. Does that answer your question?
To an extent, but it need not be aggression. It can be because of the knowledge.
Yes. So you have more knowledge as a leader, which is okay. What you need to do is set the ball rolling for the person who is the one, your subordinate. You know you have more knowledge. I'm reminded of this incident where long ago, I think it's more than 20 years, when I was at home and I was working with the people who came to help at home with the gardening and other stuff. And while we were communicating to them, I was getting frustrated at their not being able to understand what we were trying to communicate to them. And there's one very interesting thing that my dad told me, which I'll never forget. He said, if he was at your same level of competency, he wouldn't be there. If he was as clever as you, then he wouldn't be sitting in that position. He wouldn't be doing that job. So when you respect that person knows less than you, and yet you'll be firm and make sure that you have a roadmap for him, you have a roadmap for yourself, you create the opportunity to create an amazing journey for both of you. So ask yourself, I always say, how is it that we are respecting the other person? And when you give respect, you will get it. Yes? Did that answer your question? All right.
Morning, Samir. As your title says, awesome presentation, like awesome workers.
Thank you.
The biggest challenge whether an individual and an organization face is they don't know how to adapt to the what you call quickly changing the way the customer trends or the market trends going. You have cited an example of Kodak failing to forecast in the future like a digital camera will what you call like conquer the market. Any tips how an individual or an organization can quickly adapt to the what you call the changing the world, the what you call like the ever-changing world? How they can what you call foresee? Any tips or like any insights on that?
There's no one single answer. But yet, what I would say is, if you challenge yourself trying to find out what is it that your competitors are doing to fulfill the need in the market, constantly ask yourself, identify who are your top 5, 10, 15, 20 competitors in the market. Look at how their sales force is in the market and what are they doing. Most of the time what happens is we are so focused on what we are doing that we do not go into deeper study about what our competitors are doing. We have to gather knowledge as much as possible. And one of the fundamental things that each and every person within an organization must practice is continuously learning. What happens when we get into a role? When we get into a job, we sit there, we start doing that job day in, day out. And we think we're going to die doing this job for the rest of our life. How many of us actually create a roadmap for ourselves? How many of you are in sales over here? You're in sales. Brilliant. So one of the biggest challenges that is faced with salespeople is how to do good prospecting, right? How do you prospect a good client? How do you find out who is a good client? Now, if you go to Google and you look for Harvey Mackay's envelope 66 questions, it's a brilliant tool, which I'm reflecting over here because it comes in the relevance of having effective conversations, trying to understand your people better. 66 questions which actually define that person. Because when you're selling to someone, you're not selling to an organization or entity or something which is very intangible. You're selling to a person. There is somebody within the other organization that you are going to approach and present and find out things from. But when we go there, what we do is we always focus on what can we take away from there. How can we get something? Our fundamental flaw is we are not in the giver's mode at all. Most people over here, I don't mean here, I mean within our community, is not in a giver's mode. We are always in a taker's mode. We want to take things from others. We want to take things from our boss. We want to take things from the HR. We want to take things, salaries and everything. But if we are in a giver's mode, then what happens is we create the opportunity to expand what we can actually achieve. So to answer your question, going back to what it is, the one thing that we can do is constantly ask ourselves, what are our competitors doing? Create the awareness. And when you think about competitors, you do not have to think about only the competitors in Dubai, for example, or UAE. In your relevant industry, worldwide, what is anybody doing anywhere? And how can you do better? Does that answer your question? Yes? Thank you for the question. I think we can take one last question. Absolutely.
Terminate both at a time.
Thank you. A very interesting question, actually. A few months ago, I started this journey, which I call Awesome Walkers, where I started having amazing conversations with people. And everybody asked me, why are you doing this? What is the whole purpose of it? And I said, I have no clue, but I just love having conversations. And along the way, I had this amazing insight that this is one of the things that lacks within organizations. Effective communication, or conversations, not even communication, conversations. And when I did a little bit of research, I found out that Google has been doing a lot of research on this very aspect of what is it, the one thing that can propel organizations to the highest level? And out of all the answers, you can set a lot of KPIs, you can have a lot of financial targets, you can have a lot of motivations and everything. But the one thing that actually boosts company performance is having those conversations. Social integration, they call it. So today I call myself a corporate conversationalist because I go into organizations and what I do is I have those conversations that they never have. Because I don't talk about sales. We don't talk about other things related to the business. What we do is we talk about people. Because what lacks within organizations is the human element, the human touch. And when you start unlocking those conversations, then magic happens, because when people start seeing other people not as colleagues but as human beings, then even if it is ladies, what they really require is attention, for instance. When you can start seeing individuals in a different light, any organization, magic happens. And then you do not see that that person is female, I will not go there. What you do is you try to identify why is it that you don't go where you don't go. And you ask those questions and you start those conversations. And then barriers come down. And like I say, magic happens. Thank you very much. You have been an amazing audience. I hope I have added value. Have a great day. Thank you.